The sun was unrelenting, the day on August kind of heat that turned car doors into branding irons and made even the wind feel heavy. I'd already knocked on 12 doors, each one blurring into the next. Small talk, scratched pens, checked boxers. But when I reached the house on Sycamore Lane, something made me pause. The porch creaked under my boots. Faded blue paint curled up from the wood, and a lone wind chime, shaped like an old key, tinkled softly in the humidity. I knocked twice, clipboard in hand, adjusting the pen tucked behind my ear. The door opened halfway. She stood there with one hand braced against the frame, as if holding it open was an afterthought. I noticed the paint-for smears of sage green on her knuckles, and a faint streak across her cheek like a careless whisper. Her eyes studied me, not with suspicion, but curiosity, sharpened by something else, stillness, maybe. "Ma'am," I said, politely, "I'm with the U.S. Census Bureau. Just a few questions, won't take long." She didn't answer right away. The screen door hissed as she pushed it open. "You shouldn't be out in this heat," she said, stepping aside. Her voice was calm, measured. "Come in, Nunes, no place for questions." It wasn't the kind of invitation I was supposed to accept. Protocol said, "Stay on the porch." Neutral territory. But her tone wasn't flirtation, it was faintly maternal, faintly weary, and somehow it made refusal feel rude. I stepped inside. It smelled like linseed oil and books. A ceiling fan clicked overhead, slow and steady, barely stirring the warm air. The floor beneath my shoes was cool tile, worn at the edges like someone had pasted 1,000 times. Her living room was spacious, but cluttered with canvases propped against walls, brushes soaking in glass jars, a denim apron slung over the arm of the couch. She motioned to a wooden chair by the bay window. "You can sit. I'll get lemonade. You look like someone who hasn't had a decent drink all day." "Thank you," I said, adjusting my clipboard, pretending not to notice that her fingers lingered on the doorframe just a second too long before she left the room. The chair creaked. Outside the window, the neighborhood lay still-ons, sun-bleached, a cat curled in shadow. But I caught a flicker across the street. A curtain pulled back just an inch, then dropped, someone watching. That's when I felt it, with subtle tension in the air, not quite fear, not quite secrecy, just a thread pulled taut between the quiet of the room and the world outside. She returned with 2 sweating glasses, condensation dripping down her fingers. I stood as she handed one to me. Her nails were chipped, stained with ochre and violet, not the kind of polish you buy, the kind that seeps into skin when art becomes habit. "So," she said, settling onto the edge of the couch, crossing one leg over the other, "what exactly do you need to know about me?" I smiled. "Just the basics." She tilted her head. "Isn't that always how it starts?" I clicked my pen open. "Name?" "Evelyn," she said, pausing, like she was deciding if I deserved. Her last name, then Evelyn Mercer. I wrote it down, glancing up. "And how many people live here, Ms. Mercer?" She looked out the window as she answered. "Just me now." There was weight in that word now. Enough that I didn't ask the follow-up the form wanted. I just nodded, let the silence breathe. I moved through the questions. Age, race, whether the home was owned or rented. She answered without hesitation, her voice steady. But every so often, I'd see her eyes flick toward the window, toward that neighbor's house, as if counting how long someone had been looking. When we reached the halfway mark, I offered to move into the kitchen so she could go back to whatever she'd been doing. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No rush," she said. "It's nice, actually. Talking to someone who doesn't start with, 'I'm sorry.' There was a story behind that. One she wasn't ready to tell." I kept writing. The sun shifted. In the sky, throwing long gold beams across the floor. The room grew warmer. She noticed, but said nothing. I could still feel it, that invisible line between us. Not attraction, not yet, just something charged. Something unspoken that made the air feel heavier than it should. By the time I flipped to the final page of the form, she was sitting a little closer, her lemonade untouched, her hand resting on the couch cushion, fingers stretched open, like she wanted to remember what it felt like to share a space. "Anything else?" she asked, almost too quietly. I looked down at the page. There were more questions, but not the kind you could answer with a checkbox. "No," I said. "That's all I need for now." But I knew that wasn't true. She led me down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of old paper and turpentine. The walls were lined with framed sketches, some delicate as breath, others bold with oil strokes and raw unfinished energy. "That one's crooked," she said, suddenly stopping to adjust a frame. "My husband used to fix those things. I've stopped bothering." I didn't say anything. The words hung there for a moment, quiet and personal. Her voice had softened just enough to let the name slip in, even if she never spoke it. "Used to" was doing a lot of work in that sentence. We stepped into what I guessed was once a formal dining room, but now felt more like a sunroom turned studio. Light poured through gauzy curtains, warming the hardwood floors and lighting up a dozen half-finished canvases leaning against furniture like forgotten conversations. Brushes were gathered in mason jars, and a small ceramic plate held clusters of dried paint like fossils. She handed me the census form back with a faint smile, then knelt near a cluttered side table and pulled open a drawer. "There's a record of the mortgage in here somewhere," she murmured, flipping through envelopes, old receipts, and a folded newspaper clipping that fluttered to the floor. I knelt to help her pick it up, careful not to touch her hand, but close enough to smell the faintest mix of lemon cleaner and lavender oil on her shirt. Our fingers brushed bare. She didn't pull away. She glanced at me, then turned slightly, almost to hide the way, her mouth pressed into a thoughtful line. I cleared my throat and stood up. "Take your time. I'm not in a rush." She rose too, brushing invisible dust. From her jeans, people usually are weak. Continued the slow circuit through her house. I jotted down square footage estimates, estimated utility costs, how many bedrooms and baths. She spoke in cautious fragments, how she used to teach art at the local college, how she hadn't touched the guest room since February. She asked about my work, whether I enjoyed it or just did it for the paycheck. "I'm in grad school," I said. "This is a summer job, pays just enough for coffee and rent." "Student loans?" she asked. I nodded. "More than I'll admit to my mother." That made her smile. Not a full one, just a small private upturn at the corner of her mouth that made her look younger, like someone who remembered what it felt like to laugh without checking the room first. We ended up in the kitchen. It was clean but lived in, the kind of space where tea bags dry on a paper towel near the sink, and someone still uses a cookbook with notes. Scribbled in the margins, she opened the fridge and pulled out a tall pitcher of iced tea. "Still hot as sin," she said. "Want some, please?" She poured carefully, the glass clinking against the counter. But her grip slipped just enough for the cup to tip sideways, splashing a wave of tea across the floor and onto my shoes. "No, damn it," she whispered. "It's all right," I said, already reaching for a dish towel. She crouched down beside me, and we both reached for the same dripping puddle at the same time. Our hands met again, this time fully. Her skin was warm, her touch unsure but unmoving. Neither of us said anything. The ceiling fan turned lazily above, stirring air that felt suddenly too still. I glanced up at her. Her eyes were focused on the mess, but her breath had slowed. Her lip caught briefly between her teeth before she let go and looked at me. "I keep thinking," she said almost absently, "that if I just rearranged everything, maybe I'd feel different in this house." I wanted to ask different from what? But the question stayed behind my teeth. We finished wiping up the tea. I stood and tossed the towel into the sink. She leaned back on her heels, looking up at me, paint still faintly smudged on her cheek. "Thanks," she said, "for the tea or the company." I asked. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. Softened, flickered. "Both," she said. And for the first time since I knocked on her door, the silence between us didn't feel like something to break. It felt like something we both understood. By the time the sun began to slant low through her kitchen windows, the census forms were stacked neatly on the table, edges curled slightly from the heat. I had planned to leave, clipboard full, jacket folded over my arm, but as I rose from my chair, Evelyn walked to the stove, stirring something in a cast-iron pot, and said it as casually as if we'd been doing this every Thursday. "You should stay," she said without turning. "The ink needs time to dry." I hesitated. "Pretty sure it dries on its own." "Yes, well," she glanced over her shoulder, smirking just enough. "I don't like the idea of you eating gas station food in your car. I made soup. Let me pretend someone wants it." That line wasn't flippant. It came out too quietly, like it had echoed in her house for months before I heard it. So I sat back down. The soup was tomato thick, a little sweet, with rosemary and something smokier I couldn't place. She didn't use placemats or candles, just two mismatched bowls, metal spoons, and a folded dish towel between us to catch stray crumbs. A fan in the corner blew against the curtain, which fluttered like it wanted to escape. Outside, the sky was changing. Storm clouds, charcoal and slow-moving, piled up like thoughts that refused to leave. Evelyn's eyes kept flicking toward window. She broke the silence with a question that landed heavier than the soup. Do you ever feel like people already decided who you are before you even speak? I looked at her. All the time. She nodded. I think that's why I stopped going to town. There's only so many tight smiles you can take before you'd rather just stay invisible. The thunder came distant at first, then closer. The porch swing outside groaned and knocked once, hard, against the wall. She winced. That thing always does that in storms. My husband? She stopped herself, shook her head. Never mind. The lights flickered. Once, then again, then out completely. We sat in the thick hush that follows. I think the breaker's in the attic, she said, finally, rising from her chair. I'll help. We moved carefully through the dark, her hand brushing mine only once as she guided me down the narrow back hallway. The attic pull-down stairs creaked like they hadn't been used in months. She climbed first, flashlight in hand, her silhouette lit only by the last of the gold leaking through the upstairs window. The attic smelled like cedar and dust, insulation and forgotten summers. Cardboard boxes, a rolled-up rug, a lamp missing a shade. She opened a small trunk and rifled through candles. Murmuring something about backup plans and old habits, thunder cracked directly overhead. The roof trembled slightly, and she turned, her head just enough for her profile to catch in the flashlight beam. I stood close, partly to help, partly because something about the air up there had changed. Not fear, not even tension, just the sense that if I said the wrong thing, something delicate might fold in on itself. She found 2 candles and a book of matches. When she struck the first match, its brief hiss lit her face in soft orange eyes. Large mouth parted slightly. Her breath was warm, barely audible, but I heard it. Right beside me, I didn't move. She lit the second candle and passed it to me without speaking. Her fingers grazed mine. I could feel the heat knot from the flame, but from the space we had stopped pretending wasn't real. She stepped back, eyes still on me, candle between us like a line that neither of us wanted to cross, but neither of us could look away from. I don't know why I asked you to stay, she said, but the way she said it told me she did. The generator kicked on with a distant cough, and the house settled into a low, steady hum. The light bulbs stayed dark, but a few candles now flickered in corners like little promises. Evelyn carried one into the study and set it on the wide oak desk. The room smelled like turpentine, paper, and something faintly citrus. You ever been painted? She asked, standing behind the chair I'd just lowered myself into. I laughed softly. No one's ever asked. She turned to a nearby shelf and pulled out a large sketch pad, its corners curled and pages dimpled from years of hands and humidity. I always sketch when the power goes out. Habit, I guess. Makes the silence feel less big. She lit another candle and placed it closer to me. The glow warmed my collarbones and deepened the shadows under my jaw. I became a study in light and absence. Evelyn stepped back and tilted her head, lips pressing together as she observed. Hold still, you've got good angles. I don't even know what that means, I murmured, flipping through my census sheets to keep my hands busy. Want? Me too. Read while you draw. Yes, she said. Make the silence say something. I started from the top. Average household income by district. Percentage of renters in the county. She worked quickly, her charcoal pencil gliding across the page, pausing now and then to glance at me through her lashes. Her brush dipped behind her ear when she switched tools. You speak like you're half here, she said after a while, like part of you's always listening to another room. I looked up the paper in my hand, forgotten. You say that like it's a bad thing. She didn't answer, just kept sketching. The air was thick with the smell of warm graphite and something else, something harder to name. Her focus, maybe, or the quiet thrill of being seen. She moved closer without warning. The gentle rasp of her slippers on the rug was the only sound besides the generator and my heartbeat. She was near enough now that I could see the faint silver of paint beneath her fingernails. Her pencil stilled. Her free hand floated near my face, not touching, just tracing the space beside my jawline. "Hold still," she whispered. "You?" Smiled. "I want to get it right." "I didn't," I whispered back, though my lips had betrayed me. Her fingers lingered just an inch from my skin. The warmth of them stirred something inside, me, not hunger, not longing exactly, something softer, a kind of ache that only happens when you're seen too clearly. She didn't lower her hand. She didn't lean in. She just stayed like that, as if the edge of a smile might be the most dangerous thing in the world. The sky had begun to shift, that soft pink hour before real daylight, when the shadows are long and forgiving. I sat at the kitchen table, census forms now lined in neat rows. Corners weighted with salt shakers and a smooth riverstone sheet. Said was from Oregon. The ink had dried. Every box was checked, every line filled. Done beside them sat the sketch pad, open to the newest page. I hadn't seen her finish it, but there it was, my profile, shadowed in charcoal, edges blurred, into her own. 2 figures sharing a single outline. Not romantic, not sentimental, just ... honest, as if she had drawn what she saw, and nothing more. Evelyn poured the last of the coffee into my mug without asking. Her robe was wrapped tight around her, paint still smudged on her wrist, candle wax dried near. Her knuckle. She looked like someone who hadn't slept, but had decided she didn't need to. "Sun's up?" I said quietly. She nodded. "Time to go." "Yeah." I stood, folded the forms, slid them into my satchel. She stayed still, watching her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the sketchpad. Outside, I heard voices, distant but sharp thuck-clipped syllables of neighbors, who water their lawns before breakfast and never forget a face. I glanced toward the window. 2 women, 1 man with a newspaper tucked under his arm. Paused, watching. I moved to the door. My hand was on the knob when I felt her near me. "Wait," she said. Just above a whisper, I turned. She reached up. Just a simple motion, and adjusted the collar of my shirt. Her hands were steady. She smoothed the fabric like it mattered. And then she didn't step away. We stood there, inches apart, her fingers resting briefly against my chest as the morning light widened across the floor. She didn't kiss me, didn't ask me to stay, just looked at me like something had already been exchanged. "I slipped something into your clipboard," she said. I opened it halfway on instinct. Tucked inside the last page was a smaller sheet, folded once, edges still. Warm. I didn't unfold it then. I didn't have to. "I'll come back," I said. Once counting's done, her smile barely moved. "Then I'll leave the porch light on." And I walked away, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the air too bright for what I felt in my chest. The sketch paper pressed against my ribs like a held breath. I didn't look back, but I felt her watching, and somehow it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the first thing we hadn't said.